It's Pastor Jeff again. We did our test and it proved to work really well. I'm Pastor Jeff Snyder of First-Calvary Baptist Church of beautiful North Andover, Massachusetts. And I wanted to come to you today and talk again. I said it would be just a few minutes. Well, it was a little longer than that. My wife Sherry came home from the grocery store. I helped her unload the car, bashed my head with the trunk lid as I was closing it. Had a Ralphie moment from Toy Story where my glasses fell off. And I asked, did I break them? So, one of those moments. Got back in the house, and in the sunroom, there was a sparrow flying around the room. So we had to spend a few. So here we are. Life takes some unexpected twists. And I wanted to talk to you today, just for a few minutes. Let's talk about Halloween, which is coming up. It's the 28th today. Halloween, of course, is on the 31st. And people start puzzling around this time of year as Christians, should I or shouldn't I be involved in Halloween? Well, we'll cut to the chase right away, and I'm going to say yes. Be involved with Halloween. It's something Christians can and should celebrate. And here's some reasons why. Because it's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate with our community, to provide wonderful childhood memories for kids of being out in the evening, wandering around in those costumes, looking for merrily lit doors, and happy people who are offering up candy for the trick-or-treat response, and who are ready to admire your costume. I mean, it's a wonderful time, and it's a way for us to be light in the dark, both literally with our lit doorways and metaphorically by being happy people, friendly and encouraging people in a world that is often challenging. So, it's also a chance for us to practice our generosity. To work on giving to others, like so many professional books suggest. Like, here's a wonderful book on stewardship, I Like Giving, and it's filled with wonderful stories of people being generous and how it came back to them and how it impacted the lives of others. And this is a chance for us to practice that generosity towards children, towards our neighbors' kids. And that is not a bad thing. And reward children and teens alike who are out doing something constructive, celebrating in the evening, rather than being involved in any way in mischief. So that's something we certainly can support as well. It's an opportunity to have a good time together with our friends. And during a time when we're usually squirreled away inside, looking at one device or another, it's a chance to disconnect from social media and to connect with our own neighbors and with their children. It's a lovely evening. It's a lot of fun. And it's a chance to admire those costumes and to be kind, to say, ooh, look at you. One of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a princess from Frozen, and they can explain to you who those characters are if you really don't know, which is a lot of fun too. So if you're not convinced, all right, if that wasn't enough for you, let's take a look at the history of Halloween. How did it get here? Where did it come from? How did it develop over time? And who ends up casting shade on it? And when? And the answers might surprise you more than a little. Now, I'm English, French, German, Dutch, and Irish. So I really like the beginning because it's Irish in origin. Now, 2,500 years ago in Ireland, around the time the prophets Joel and Malachi were working in Judea, 500 years before Jesus would be born, they were celebrating a festival called Samhain. And it was a harvest festival. And it marked the official end of summertime. This was harvest season. And it was believed that the ghosts of last year's dead returned to mess with the harvest itself and with people in the community at this time of year. So, adults, to bring this to a halt, would end up dressing up as demons and hobgoblins and witches to confuse and scare away those ghosts. You want to be in costume because you really don't want your departed relative that you never really liked anyway to recognize you. You wanted them to be spooked away. So, you'd put out the fire in the home hearth, parade inside and outside in the house, being noisy and limited destructive, with different forms of mischief that will now drive these ghosts away. They won't stay in your house. They won't stay in your neighborhood. You paraded all the way to the edge of town, and there you had a huge bonfire. And you carried on. You danced around the bonfire. You did all sorts of crazy things in your costume. And this was all to scare the ghosts away. And the bonfire celebrated the harvest and scared off those roving spirits. Now, we need to pause here for just a second because there's a darker side to this as well. Back in that day, 2,500 years ago, they didn't understand the cause of mental illness of various forms, and they felt that somebody who was exhibiting odd behavior was probably also spirit possessed. And so, to make a point to all the other spirit possessed that those spirits ought to leave, they would burn one of those people in the bonfire. Horrible thing. And in a day when there is a lot of anti-intellectualism going on, we need to remember that knowledge is power. And knowledge keeps us from doing really horrible things, as was done in this case. But the purpose was to try to protect your community. That's the origin of Halloween. But it doesn't stop there. The Romans ended up adopting the Irish celebration when they conquered the Irish. And they decided, we're going to do away with that whole sacrificial thing. We're not burning people. That's not a good idea. But we're going to add 2 celebrations to this, to Samhain, that are ours. And one of them is to remember the dead. So this works out really well with Samhain. And the other has an apple as its symbol. And we can incorporate that as well. So the Romans ditched the idea that they were afraid of spirits that were messing with the crops and the people around 40 to 60 AD or so, about the time of the Acts of the Apostles and Paul's letters. But they enjoyed the idea of dressing up. They liked the spooky fun, and so they added the twist of bobbing for apples. So if you've ever bobbed for apples, stuck your head in water and tried to bite an apple, you can thank the Romans for that experience. That's where it comes from. So after the Romans, around 609 AD, the Catholics decided that they would co-opt this tradition as well. Prince Boniface created All Martyrs' Day, which became All Saints' Day, which was celebrated on November 1st. And the Catholics brought many elements to the Irish holiday of Samhain. And as part of this new celebration, and they included the Irish bonfires and costumes, because in part they wanted to convert the pagan Irish to Catholicism. And this went a long way towards doing that. Involving people's traditions tends to be really helpful. And so a new holiday had a new name. It was All Hallows Day, after All Hallow Messe, which is the Middle English way of saying All Saints' Day. And the night before, when the bonfires and the costumes happened, that was All Hallows Eve. And I think we're familiar with that term. The Irish also gave us the jack-o'-lanterns. Much later in time, apparently after Christianity had arrived in Ireland, because they had a folk tale that went with the whole idea of some lit vegetable And it was the folktale of Stingy Jack, who was a sinning drunkard, a wretched person. So this is a moral story. And as the story goes, Stingy Jack, he tricked the devil into climbing a tree. He carved a cross on the tree, and he wouldn't let the devil down until the devil promised never to tempt Jack to sin ever again. Jack dies, and he's way too sinful for heaven nonetheless. The devil remembers him and the trick that he pulled, and so the devil doesn't want anything to do with him either. You can't come in either place. You're barred. So you are condemned, says the devil, to wander the frigid darkness until Judgment Day. And then we'll decide what happens to you. So, Stingy Jack, and see, there's another reason that you want to be involved with Halloween. You don't want stingy attached to your name. So we're going to see what happens to Jack here, being stingy. And he begged the devil, well, at least give me coals to light my way out of hell. You've got plenty of those. And so the devil gave him, stingy is as stingy does, a single coal, which Jack kept in a turnip that he had gnawed hollow with his teeth. And that became Jack's lantern. And Jack continues to wander with that hollowed out roasting turnip for light right up to this day and beyond. So both the Scots and the Irish paid tribute to Jack by recreating his lantern with potatoes and turnips and beets. You ever smelled a hollowed out turnip? What do you think jack-o'-lanterns were believed to do when they were lit and placed outside in the night, based on what you've heard so far? Yes, you're right. They were there to scare off evil ghosts. That's not the end of the story, though, and we'll get back to that a little later. Now, trick-or-treating. We can thank the Europeans for this. There are lots of ideas of where trick-or-treating came from, and the most popular one is from the 1800s in Europe. And there was a custom there called souling. On All Souls Day, which was November 2nd, we're adding more celebrations as we move along. Right after All Saints' Day, when the Christians who had departed were remembered, Christians walked through the village begging for these little square biscuits with currants in them that were called soul cakes. And the beggars promised prayers for the dead, for those relatives who had gone before them. They would do that for any donor who gave them cakes, and the number of prayers would rise with the number of soul cakes that were given to them. And the beggars promised that they would pray for dead relatives of the donors, and the numbers of prayers would be the equivalent to the numbers of cakes given. And the more prayers that the dearly departed received, the less time that they would spend in purgatory. So, you see, once again, we're benefiting the community. One, the beggars are getting fed, which is a good thing. And two, they are praying, which is always a good thing, and they're praying for those who have gone before to shorten their time in purgatory, which made the living feel a lot better about what was going on. So that's where trick-or-treating originates. And once again, it supports the community. Now, let's go to America. Oh, Protestants in America in the early colonial period, well, let's go pre-America into the colonial period. They wanted nothing to do with this suspicious European Catholic holiday. No, we weren't going to have anything to do with that, so there was none of this business. Pardon me, I'm still getting over COVID. Didn't mean to give you a trick there. So, until 1840. And in 1840, things changed. The Irish began to arrive on America's shores in great numbers due to the potato famine. And they bring the Halloween holiday with them into the New World. It's always a good thing about immigrants, is they bring interesting traditions with them that become part of this great American experiment that we've got going on here, and it's something to be welcomed, not something to be feared. And it adds a richness and complexity to life that is absolutely wonderful. And they brought it with them, complete with the costumes and the mischief. And there was a favorite trick that came with it, and it was the dumping over of an outhouse. And there's all sorts of ribald stories about how some outhouse gets tipped over with someone in it, you know. And there's also this odd tradition of taking the front gate off its hinges in somebody's fence. Here in New England, they had Cabbage Night, the night before Halloween, when mischievous teenagers would run through people's garden patch, tearing up cabbages and throwing them at people's houses. And after they had had that New England fun, they would have apple fights in the street. Peculiar tradition. And there's others. You can find all sorts of the night before names with all sorts of odd traditions, like Goosey Night. Figure that one out. But so by the Protestant kids, now they wanted in on the action. They were seeing what fun was going on with the Irish, and they wanted to be part of that. So in the late 1800s, American kids would dress up, and they were going door to door for treats, kind of familiar situation for us today, and they were celebrating together in their communities. It was spooky, but again, now there are no fear of any real ghosts being involved. That has gone by the wayside. And when the Irish got to New England, well, they modified their jack-o'-lanterns. No more turnips, no more potatoes, no more little piddly things. There were pumpkins to be carved. And this was far easier to come by and to carve than those piddly little turnips. And they loved it. They had these great big faces that they would carve in them, scary faces, demon faces in the hollowed out pumpkins, and they would set them outside to scare off those wicked ghosts in the night as we see them today. I've always loved the idea of these jack-o'-lanterns as sentinels in the night, keeping watch over us and keeping us in peace. So it's a wonderful tradition. The Pilgrims gave us pumpkin pies for Thanksgiving from the pumpkin innards, and the Irish gave us the symbol of Halloween from the pumpkin shell, which is a wonderful thing. And I misspoke a little bit there. There's still some of that hint of ghostliness going on, the warding off of wicked spirits. So, let's talk about the United States. Let's talk about us today. Halloween's popularity, well, it's vacillated in the United States. It lost popularity in the 20s and the 30s when all that mischief was going on. It was on a steep rise amongst young vandals. But by the 50s, town leaders got organized and they curbed the vandalism and they focused on a celebration for school-aged children. And then the real spookiness sets in. Trick-or-treating's popularity grows after that, after they tame it down a bit. And this becomes the second holiday only to Christmas in money spent. Approximately $4 billion is spent annually on costumes, decorations, parties, sweets. In 1985, the Senate held hearings on daylight savings time, and the candy makers are rumored to have placed candy pumpkins on the seats of every senator as an incentive to vote for extending daylight savings time into November to extend the trick-or-treating time, the time when kids could be out, forcing neighbors to buy more candy. Maybe today we need costumes that will scare off the mass marketing experts. There's a thought. Now, there's one more co-opting of Halloween. We've seen how it developed and how people adopted it and moved it forward. There's one more that happened back in the 80s as well. In 1982, Pat Robertson declared, along with the Christian Coalition, that Halloween was somehow satanic. He believed that young minds would become fascinated by all those scary things, and that would lead them to the devil. Read Sinister Warfare Behind the Scenes of the Halloween holiday. Evangelical fundamental Christians, they created hell houses this time of year, hell houses for Jesus, to scare teens straight. Prior to 1982, the only mention of the devil in association with this holiday was about Jack fooling and trapping Satan up in a tree. For the vast majority of Halloween's history, the main concern has been trying to protect families and communities and having some spooky fun. So that's the history of Halloween. And maybe that'll make you feel a little more secure in celebrating as a Christian. Go ahead, I say. Celebrate with your Christian friends, celebrate with everybody else. It's a fine tradition. It originates in the desire to protect family and friends, to build community, and it's picked up some weird and wonderful new twists along the way. If you grow up when I did, one of those traditions was watching It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown every season and being reminded that you should have Dolly Madison cakes. So that was one of the newer traditions that I grew up with. Share smiles. Love your neighbors as yourself, one of the two great commandments that Jesus tells us about. And keep a light on in the dark, attracting all sorts of friendly spooks and goblins, along with the Power Rangers, the princesses, the sci-fi franchise characters, and all the rest. Oh, and by the way, if a kid breaches in and ends up grabbing a handful of candy instead of a single piece, let it go. I mean, it's possible that that child has motor difficulties rather than issues of greed. And we need to be sympathetic to everyone. Let them all enjoy the holiday. Don't chastise them. Make it a fun night for everyone. God bless you all. And enjoy this seasonal celebration. One of the first of several that we'll be having as the light fades and the nights stretch longer. God bless you all. God loves you. And I hope to see you again soon. Join us on Sunday if you can. We got a special sermon just right for this season. So long for now.